the next week or 10 days. And he said, if you will get up a gathering of people, I will make a speech to them, give a barbecue, and Crockett said he'll pay for it. And the guy says, no, Colonel, we're not rich in this section, but we have plenty of provisions to contribute for a barbecue and some to spare for those who have none. The push of crops will be over in a few days, and we can then afford a day for barbecue. So this Thursday, I will see to getting it up on Saturday week. Come to my house on Friday. We will go together and promise you a very respectable crowd to see and hear you. So this guy says, no, don't worry about the barbecue. I'll pay for the barbecue. Come on over, and you can tell the crowd exactly what we're talking about here. He introduced himself. They did exchange pleasantries again, and he got his name. His name was allegedly Horatio Bunce. What Mr. Crockett didn't know about Horatio Bunce was that he was quite the center of influence in his area, very well respected. And, eventually, Bunce certainly worked hard to bring a lot of people to his place on the day that Crockett was to come in. At the appointed time, he was in his house. He came to his house right before the meeting, and having told the conversation to everybody that he had met and to every man he'd stayed all night with, he found that it gave the people an interest and confidence in Crockett stronger than he'd ever seen manifested before. Although Crockett was considerably fatigued when he reached the house of Mr. Bunce and under ordinary circumstances should have gone early to bed, he said he stayed awake until midnight talking about the principles and affairs of government with Mr. Bunce. And he got more real true knowledge of them than he felt he had gotten in his life even before. Nonetheless, the next morning they went to the barbecue, and to his surprise, about 1,000 men were there. This was quite a turnout back then. I met a good many whom I had not known before, according to what Crockett said, and they and my friend introduced me until I had a pretty good, well-acquainted reputation with everybody. In due time, he spoke. They gathered up around the stand that had been erected, and Crockett opened his speech by saying, fellow citizens, I present myself before you today feeling like a new man. My eyes have lately been opened to truths which ignorance or prejudice or both had heretofore hidden from my view. I feel that I can offer you the ability to render you more valuable service than I have ever been able to render before. I'm here today more for the purpose of acknowledging my error than to seek your votes. That I should make this acknowledgement is due to myself as well as to you. Whether you will vote for me is a matter for your consideration only. And Crockett went about telling him that Mr. Bunce was the key individual that convinced him of his error. Crockett believes it was his best speech he'd ever made in his life, and he's entitled for the credit for that, and people were satisfied with it. As it went down, Crockett apologized, and the crowd gave him quite an endorsement, quite a rousing shout of endorsement. And as he says, he's not much given to tears, but he was taken with choking then and felt some big drops rolling down his cheeks. And I tell you now that the remembrance of those few words spoken by such a man and the honest, hearty shout they produced is worth more to me than all the honors I've received and all the reputation I have ever made or ever shall make as a member of Congress. So while it was only $20,000 in many years past, it sets precedents, and certainly there's a lot of precedents that are being set today with massive amounts of money that are being appropriated for many, many different purposes. It's about time for me to go through a little bit of the news today, the news that is not very often reported or underreported. That's what Mysterious America is all about, giving you some insight on that. One of the stories that came to my attention was Obama nominating a John Bryson for the head of the Commerce Department. Barack Obama's nominee for the Commerce Secretary says the rich nations, like ours, should redistribute wealth to the poor as they won't cut down trees. This is according to CNS News. John Bryson, President Obama's nominee to head the Commerce Department, told a UN Energy Conference in 2009 that a global wealth redistribution program was needed to keep poor people in developing countries from using their own forest resources. Training of peoples, he says, to maybe help in supporting this, development of law enforcement regimes, development of strong governance practices, all those things have to be done, according to Bryson. Bryson said that establishing things such as a global forest law enforcement regime would require substantial investments on the part of wealthier countries so that the international community could better control how poor countries use their forest reserves. and resources. Well, to me, this basically sounds like another way to inflict fines, taxes, and control on other countries. They already do this with the banking business, with the International Monetary Fund and other organizations, showing them how to balance seeding new forests while harvesting the older ones would likely be a less intrusive way to accomplish the same goals. Another bit of information here about China apparently has divested 97% of its holdings in U.S. Treasury bills. This came by way of the internet on CNS News. China has dropped 97% of its holdings in U.S. Treasury bills, decreasing its ownership of short-term U.S. government securities from a peak of $210 billion in May of 2009 to $5.69 billion in March 2011, which is the most recent month reported by the U.S. Treasury. Since October, however, China has also started to divest from longer-term U.S. Treasury securities, and as reported by the Treasury Department, China's ownership of the U.S. national debt has decreased in each of the 5 months on record, including November, December, January, February, and March, as they're dumping all this stuff. So in other words, money for wars in Libya and bailouts, along with many other promises of hope and change, are nothing more than borrowed money with catastrophic future consequences. I guess you've heard the cry from Washington, we've got to have more and more taxes. That seems to be the general solution. And now we'll go to the good news from the latest terrorist elimination campaign. According to Al Jazeera News, Ilyas Kashmiri and 7 or 8 of his associates, Al-Qaeda associates that is, were killed in a drone attack in the last couple of days. Al Jazeera admitted that Kashmiri was a big Al-Qaeda planner, likely behind the recent attack in Karachi and even the infamous Mumbai killings that took the lives of at least 160. Perhaps the information retrieved from bin Laden's lair was pretty beneficial. What also would be beneficial is just how many have got into the dependency on our government for solutions to housing, food, and clothing, in other words, living. Certainly there was a time in our history which Americans were decidedly self-reliant. They are also happy to help each other way back when. Some of that old spirit still survives today. And when we come back, we're going to have some segments of an interview between the author of this book, G. Edward Griffin, and Norman Dodd, which will show the struggles that have gone underway to try to reveal this to the general public. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, back with interviews of Norman Dodd. You're listening to Mysterious America on iWatch Radio. Come on down. Give me a call. Back in a minute. Back with Mysterious America. I'm your guide, Alex Bond. Thanks so much for sticking with me. Our call-in line's 314-714-4200, and of course there is email. Just try Patrick at iWatchRadio.com. My name's Alex Bond. Thanks so much for sticking with me. We do have these segments of an interview between J. Edward Griffin and Norman Dodd. Just a little backstory on some of this I think you'd appreciate. Today, this is a journey of one man. Actually, other people were involved too. But it was an official congressional investigation and the discovery they made years ago that major American foundations have a hidden agenda. This may be just too incredible for many of you to believe. Furthermore, it may not be something you want to believe, regardless of the evidence. There's a psychological term for that, which it's called cognitive dissonance. And this permits the human brain to just totally deny what it sees or experiences as a reality. Instead, the brain readily accepts a substitute or manufactured perception, one that it can't accept. So this is going to be some very incredible news and very difficult for many to take, because I got to tell you, everything else that is out there is going to tell you that these foundations, all this, they're wonderful. But what they found out was quite different. In America, well, I don't know if you're ready for it or not. This is, it's not up to me to decide what you're ready for. I'm merely a researcher. What we're going to uncover today, you can certainly check out, and certainly there's ways to do that through the internet and a book and many other methods. This all begins with the interview of a Mr. Norman Dodd by G. Edward Griffin in 1990. Griffin is an accomplished author and researcher himself, writing what is perhaps the best and most revealing book on the Federal Reserve to date, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I have to the left. It seems that many more in Congress are beginning to understand what Griffin wrote and why an agency that is not a direct part of the U.S. government is creating more economic havoc and profit for itself than was known at the time of its approval in 1913. Griffin's interview with Dodd was very timely. He died a short time after, and it stands as part of the secret history of the United States, a history which clearly serves as a warning that our education system, our State Department, and other agencies were all target for infiltration with a hidden agenda to drive this country away from the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and into a collective system. Dodd had a big part of the experience with the banking industry prior to this. He was quite well respected at the time. He had all the standard education, Yale University, and I believe some other ones. He was aboard with the Morgan banks before the 1929 Depression. His expertise as a young man was eventually required to find out just what happened. After 2.5 years, he gave them a report. As Dodd puts it, we are no longer in the practice of safe banking standards. That's the way he put it to them. And later on, they approached Dodd and asked him to come up with some solutions for these problems. Well, about another year after attempting to get people interested in these solutions within the hierarchy of these very big banks, he realized that they were doing little more than just humoring him. Eventually, he was told that this country would never again return to such standards, so Dodd did quit the Morgan Bank and was blackballed from ever getting a job in banking again. However, he did stay in the financial community, investing, doing different things in this area, and apparently his reputation grew. He was known as a man of integrity. And before the McCarthy hearings, I want you to know this is before the McCarthy hearings, Carol Reese, a Tennessee representative since 1920, was put in charge of investigating the un-American activities on American foundations. AJ, just go ahead and run the picture of the young Norman Dodd. This is back in the 50s, if you have that available. This is the young version, and this is the version, you got that, AJ? The young version of the Norman Dodd that we talked about. Anyway, when he gets it up, you'll get an idea what he looks like at the time of the investigation. Dodd was actually put in charge of the research. He got a staff together and did many of the interviews with heads of foundations